Hi everyone, let's make a high rye bourbon old fashioned. I've done some videos in the past where I've made old fashions and I've worked the proof up and changed a few factors in various videos. I've done it at we'll call the standard or typical 90 or so proof that you'll probably see when you order an old fashioned in most restaurants and bars. And I've said in the past, if you don't specify the type of bourbon that you want, you just order an old fashioned. I would say the majority of places will probably give you an old fashioned with using one of the following four bourbons: Maker's Mark, Buffalo Trace, Woodford Reserve, or Bullet Bourbon. And I also then did some videos where I kind of upped the proof. We did higher proof bourbon old fashioned using 110 proof, and then I use a higher proof than that. So we experimented a lot with the proofs, and I did find that when I used a higher proof, since an old fashioned is a spirit forward cocktail, the bourbon you're using definitely makes a difference and definitely can help that drink stand out or not, depending what you're using. Whereas there are other cocktails where it's the spirit you're using, the bourbon, the whiskey, whatever the drink might be, is less important. But in an old-fashioned, it is very important. So we experimented with proof, and I did find that when the proofs were higher, it definitely kind of amped it up a little bit. But on the flip side, you could also have something where the proof is so high that it's drowning everything out, and there's other factors such as the bitters in the syrup. And so I was thinking that I also would like now to try to make an old-fashioned with maybe putting the proof down a drop, not too low, maybe still a little bit higher than you might get in a restaurant or bar, and now kind of putting that rye factor in there. Because there's a reason that a lot of restaurants will serve you, or bars will serve you, an old-fashioned using Bullet. I've seen it a lot of times, a lot of restaurants. I just had one a couple of weeks ago that did a variation on that using Bullet Bourbon. A lot of restaurants use Bullet Bourbon, and I think the reason is because of the rye content. Now, old fashions technically could be either rye or bourbon, although old fashions typically are bourbon. On the flip side, Manhattans could also technically use either one, but are typically rye. But the point is that in the rye factor, using a bourbon with a little bit more rye, there's a spice factor in there. So I kind of thought that it might be interesting to this bottle that I just did a review on, the Old Grandad Bonded. It's 100 proof, so that's a little bit higher, let's say, than your typical old-fashioned you might have in a restaurant, but it's also a little bit lower in proof than some of the high-proof old-fashions that I made. But on the other side, Old Grandad has 27% rye. So that's pretty close to the Bullet, which uses 28% rye. So I thought that was very close. The only flip side with that is the corn factor. The Old Grandad is 63% corn, whereas Bullet is 68% corn. So my thinking is maybe the Bullet may have a little more sweetness in it than the Old Grandad, but just for that corn factor that has a sweetness. But the key part is the rye. It's very similar rye content. It's also about $8 to $10 cheaper than Bullet Bourbon. So, but I thought it was a good one to use since I have it on hand. Just cracked it open. So let's make a high rye bourbon, an Old Grandad high rye old fashioned. And before we make it, just to clarify, this is a high rye bourbon old-fashioned. And just one last point I just want to make, because it is important. The Old Grandad Bonded is 10 more proof points than the Bullet Bourbon. Bullet Bourbon is 90 proof. This is 100 proof. So there's another factor that's also different than the Bullet. So 10 more proof points, about the same rye. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a decent proof, and you're getting a high rye bourbon all in one. So let's make a high rye bourbon old-fashioned, Old Grandad style. 2 ounces of Old Grandad Bonded over a big square cube. Half an ounce of simple syrup. A few dashes of Angostura bitters. Mix it all up. And voila, there it is. Your Old Grandad Bonded high rye bourbon old fashioned. Cheers. That's very good. And you know what? That all comes together. I'm getting proof. I definitely feel that this thing is more than standing up in the drink. You definitely get the proof, but there's that factor. You definitely taste the rye spice. It's not Bullet Bourbon, but it definitely has the same type of a mouthfeel in terms of the rye spice you get when they make a Bullet in a restaurant. I've never seen a restaurant make this. I don't think they even have this. I think this is just more exclusively for where you find this in a liquor store that would carry it. Let me give this one more taste. This is a very well-rounded old-fashioned. So I would say whether you're using this, using bullet, if you want your old-fashioned, if you like rye, and it's funny because I'm not a high rye content, enthusiast, where, although I am, as I mentioned, I'm trying to get more into it. In the cocktail, I do think it really does serve a very important purpose. But if you can get a combination of decent proof, where it's not overpowering, but it's not too low either, a little bit higher than that normal 90 or so range, and a bit of rye spice, well, that explains to me certainly why places like using a high rye bourbon in an old-fashioned. But what they're not doing is usually having that and at least 100 proof. So you heard it here. Cheers. This is a good one. I'm telling you. If you like rye and you like a little spice in your old-fashioned, a little bit of punch, but nothing too crazy, this is it for you. Cheers. Take care. And thanks for watching.